all leading up to a conference that we have, SharePointConference.org, which happens in the April-May timeframe every year. But if you're in the DC area and you're interested in hosting a meeting, or you have a topic for a future meeting, please email me, stevew@suskutech.com, or you can look us up at thesug.org and spread the word about this organization and all of the talks that we do. Today's session, as I mentioned, is what's coming in SharePoint 2013. Our presenter is Liam Cleary, SharePoint MVP. Again, he's with Suskutech. I am Steve Witt, the VP of Training and Product Development here at Suskutech. During the session, please enter any questions in the window on the right. We'll save most of the questions for the end and try to cover as many as we can. Today's presentation is going to last about an hour, and we've left room at the end, a half hour for any questions that you might have. And knowing this topic is, and the product is so new, we're envisioning a lot of questions. And then afterwards, the recording of this session will be available via the sug.org website. Today's presenter, as I mentioned, Liam Cleary. He's a SharePoint MVP, does a lot of speaking. You can see him at any of the SharePoint events, from SP TechCons to SharePoint Saturdays, all around. He's been an MVP for a number of years. He's been with us for, I believe, 3 years now. And looking forward to hearing him speak today. One caveat on today's presentation, SharePoint 2013 and what you're going to see Liam present. This is a preview version only. So there is no promises implied by Microsoft that what is actually released to market will contain the features that you see, and that it is more than likely going to change significantly in some regards from what you see today and what is ultimately released to market. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Liam. Liam, I'll go ahead and make you the presenter.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully everybody should see the screen. I assume you can see that, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, so SharePoint 2013, just to kind of recap some of the things that I'm going to go through. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through administration or central administration. I'm going to focus more on the end user experience, some of the new features. I'm going to go through some of the UI bits and pieces, and just some of the general new things that you should be looking for. So first off the bat, if you haven't seen SharePoint 2010, this is the new Metro style SharePoint 2013. Notice it looks a little bit different. One of the big changes that we can see is right over here in this area. As with all releases of SharePoint, we tend to see a slight change, moving the welcome control around, moving the site actions, the site settings menus around. So you can see we've got the welcome control. Notice it's a little bit different. You'll notice that there's not a sign in as a different user anymore, but we do have an About Me link, which is actually linked directly to the My Site profile, which we'll look at a little bit later. And obviously we have a sign out mechanism. Now the biggest change is this new icon that's been introduced, which for most of us, we've seen that icon in many applications. That's now the icon for the site actions menu that used to be there. And directly from this menu, we're able to do the standard mechanisms, edit page, show ribbon. We'll talk about share with. We'll talk about add an app. But you can access the contents as you would normally. So we can do view all site content, which is what we used to see in SharePoint 2010. But when we go to that page, you'll see it looks very, very different. So now we have this idea of lists and libraries and apps, and all of the components now represent applications in their own right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through some of these components. But firstly, if I go back to the site settings, you'll see that we have this new component called Design Manager. Now, Design Manager is fantastic. addition to the SharePoint world. I'm not going to focus on this one, but just to give you an idea, this allows you, if I click Design Manager, if I was the person that made the Photoshop files, the nice sexy UI, the CSS, all those bits and pieces, I'm able to package all of those components together and simply upload them to SharePoint. I don't have to use SharePoint Designer. I don't have to use Visual Studio. I can use Adobe products or any other HTML product that generates HTML, CSS, and images, and effectively follow the steps and upload all of these pieces to create my new sexy style. And at the end of it, which is even better, I can create a design package. A design package that's exported effectively creates a solution package that I can then pick up and take to the next environment and deploy once again. Now, I'm not going to focus on that one. That's more of the user, and that'll be an upcoming webinar that we'll do. So let's focus on site settings. We've all seen this before. Looks very much the same. Some new features have been enhanced and new changes. Obviously, we're still waiting for an icon over here. But there's lots and lots of new features. So if we look at the site collection features, the list has kind of expanded significantly over the last set of features in SharePoint 2010. And I'll go through some of these features as we go through the presentation today. There are some new options. We'll talk about device channels, some of the custom navigation changes that have been made, some of the term store changes, and then there's lots and lots of things to do with social that we'll go through. So first off, if we go back to the top, you'll see that we have a share link, a follow link, and of course we have this little funny focus on content link. So if I just go back to the home page, you'll see kind of like the Office 2013 preview, where you can remove the ribbon bar and have it not show up. I can now say, well, I want to look at just the content, and this will strip out anything else around the content, so I can solely focus on that content. So this is great if you're a content author, and obviously you know what it's like in SharePoint. You create a new page, you want to put some content in there. You've obviously got the left nav showing up. You might have some other stuff showing up. This is a great feature. Allows everything else to be removed, so I can just focus on the content. Now, if I choose to follow, this is part of the new social features. I can click on the follow option. This will then pop me a nice little message. You will have seen these hopefully in Office 2013, very similar notification message. And this will actually post something to my personal site, my profile pages, that's now available to everybody else to see. Now, what about if I wanted to share the site with somebody? I can click on share, and what share will allow us to do is it'll tell me who it's currently shared with, and then I can go through and start adding other people. So if I hadn't added my test user, you'll see we now get this nice Ajax kind of user picker. So I can go in, and as I type, it should start to see it spinning away, and it will come back and give me the accounts that I want to access. What I can also do is I can add them specifically to groups at this point, as well as that process, and then click share. So I could, if I wanted to, me@me.com, I could add that email address. There's no result found, but I could share that. Now, obviously, that's a bit more of a complicated story, but that process is available based on the authentication mechanism that you now have enabled. So a nice, quick, clean, easy way, instead of having to go here, site settings, people and groups, find the group, and add the user to that group. We can now do it directly from within the root of the site sitting here. So if we go back to the site, we're going to go through some different site templates that have been created for us. So one of the first ones that I want to focus on is actually the community site. So this is a new addition, a new template that's been added to SharePoint 2013, kind of bundled up with the social features. What this allows us to do is, when it loads, is it has a site that's specifically based around conversations. You can manage the discussions, create categories, and you can see what's happening. So, for example, I've gone into here, I've created a discussion, I need some training materials for an exam. If I click on that link, notice we get nice little messages. You'll see it shows my face, and notice we've also got these little badges that have been associated to the end users. So I'm going to quickly just take that URL, and I'm going to flick into one of my other user accounts. So I've got I'm logged in as a different test user here. So I can go in and say, you'll notice I can first like the comment. So yes, we've now brought the Facebook into SharePoint. You can now like something, or you can reply to something, or you'll now see this little ellipse kind of button that I can click on that shows me two options. Now this option I've enabled. You can now report a discussion comment to a moderator. A moderator is a specific role that can be added, or I can actually be alerted to any changes, even down to the discussion level. So if I actually choose to reply, I can say, yes, yes I do, see MSDN. So you get very kind of inline Facebook kind of idea. Comments can be added, responses can be done, and when that will refresh. So if I go back to my administrative view, I should be able to just refresh my page. When the page loads, I should now see that new comment. And it shows the photo of the usual, and they've also got a badge associated to them. So you'll see, as the administrator, I actually have access to assign badges or set the reputation settings or even review posts that have been reported. So what you'll see first, though, is for each of the conversation notes, you'll see who liked it and who replied to it. But if I want to associate a badge, so test user number 1 is a professional. Let's say that I think that person is fantastic. I want to change the badge that they have associated to them. So I can go to test user 1, they're a professional. I now have a moderation tab that allows me to click give badge. When I click the give badge option, this allows me to define. So I'm going to say this person's a guru and save that message, save that back to that individual user. That will then post back. The user's now a guru. If I go back to the community site and click on my conversation, I should now see that that's been reflected and that person is now a guru. Now you can obviously handle this yourself. You can go through and set the reputation settings. If we go to the home page, what you'll see is if I scroll down, you'll see these little kind of bars, and the bars represent the reputation of that person. And you can set this by going to the reputation settings, and you can say, allow this to be rated, I want it to be like this, and then these are the achievements and the scores that will represent the levels that that individual user will go to. So here's the levels here, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and they can receive these different levels based on those numbers that they achieve. And obviously you can manage your own list of gifted badges if you need to. So this is fantastic, this is great. This is a lot of the social elements that were missing from the previous version of SharePoint, that now we can have these conversations, we can now rate. And if you notice, this is just a regular site. All of these web parts are available across the site. So we can actually go in and add them into any of our other websites as well. This is also a feature that can be enabled inside of an existing team site. So I've gone to the members list. You can see that these are the members of the group, when they joined, how many discussions, how many replies, and then of course who's the person in charge and what their reputation score is. And then tells you if you earn more points, then you get to that next level. You'll notice also we have this secondary navigation now, and this is consistent across the entire platform. You'll see that we can go and say who are the top contributors, we can go through and say who are the new members, we can go and do an A to Z. That's going to take a little bit longer, and we also then have the other way around. So this navigation is consistent across all of the sites. Obviously it doesn't say top contributors and new members, it'll say other bits and pieces. So if I go back to the community site, if I want to start a new discussion, it's very straightforward, except I can't type today. Test, test. I can say I'm asking a question and I want to categorize it as general and then save that message. And then that becomes a new one, and I can then go through as another user and start adding. You also get this common navigation again, but this time you can see what's hot based on the reputation and the ratings for that conversation, the discussions that I started, and then of course unanswered questions, discussion with best replies, and anything that's featured. So this is almost works really well. So think of the whole going to the MSDN and the TechNet forums. This is kind of an approach like that, where you're able to post these questions by the users and have great conversations. So that's kind of the community element. What we also have is we have our regular group sites and we have our blog sites. If I go to a group site, we had these templates before, slightly different in the group site. You'll see that the group calendar has changed a lot and looks a lot nicer than it did before. You're able to now kind of Ajax go on and click on any of the days and click add, and then you get this nice little dialog box that comes up that actually starts to go through the process and fill those date events in there. You have the same mechanism as before, but notice you can also get access to free busy information with a graphical representation. And I can do a check to check any double bookings if I'm booking rooms or whatever else it might be. We also have other web parts on the page that allows us to do whereabouts, to find out users are in groups. We have circulations, group calendars, and phone call menus. Excuse me. Circulations allow us to kind of set up a set of people that want to go and work through something that's specific, so something that may be confidential for the individual people that are working in that team. So this is really the new enhancement, the nice new group calendar that allows us to kind of go through and add in a very sexy way, adding people and adding resources to that one. The blog site itself has been enhanced a little bit. The one thing that I really like is this. I know it's something silly, but you can change and select to the view that you would like to have of the post layout. Now notice that when we come into the blog site, I can manage the comments, I can manage categories, I can do all sorts of different things, and I can actually follow, again, using this top navigation. So if I go to one of my other users, so let's go to the test 2 user, and go into here, go to the site, and I want to look at the comments of that post. I go into the comments, and I would like to add a comment, so added comment. Wait for that to post. You'll kind of notice this same web part that was in SharePoint 2010. This is the same one. This is the noteboard used, slightly enhanced, used here inside the blog. We have the same level of administration as before, so I can go and manage the comments. And there's my comment here. I can actually edit the comment, or if I wanted to, I can select the individual item and I can put it through a delete. I can edit it the same as you would always. If I go back to here, I can also manage the categories either from here or directly inside the add category here. Now what you'll notice as I flick between and go to the lists look very different. So this is the standard list view by now. So here's an item, here's the edit, I now have a contextual search inside here, and this little ellipse button appears all over the place. So directly from here I can now create views, or I could go to the list as always and do it the same from up here. If I'm on an individual item, I can press the little ellipse and then I get this little kind of navigation. So we don't have these drop-down menus that we had before. It's now a little ellipse button. I can view the item, edit the item, or whatever other mechanisms are enabled for that object that we're actually working with. And obviously adding a new item is exactly the same. What you'll notice that's a little bit different from 2010 is that by default, most lists and libraries now don't open by default in a dialog. They've actually changed that process. Now that setting obviously still exists. So in the list settings, you can go in and say, obviously I'm not the right user for the admin, but if I was the administrator, if I just go back here and go to my blog and go to manage categories, go to list, I can go to list settings, excuse me, and then obviously in the settings here, you'll see that the default is now set to no. And I actually prefer it this way. Obviously the dialogues are a little bit heavy on the JavaScript and things like that. So this is a nice approach that's here. And I can of course email a link directly to myself. So the blog site's very clean, very nice. And of course you can launch a blogging application. If it's going to be Word or whatever else, it will launch the application so you can create a blog. So let's go back to the home page. Okay, so the project sites, we had kind of project sites in the previous version, but these ones have been enhanced a little bit too. So what we'll see is we now have this new look and feel, and these are these new Metro tiles that are available. But what you'll also see is this project summary where it's kind of a timeline approach. And then, of course, we have documents. Now, if I click Edit on the task list, this is going to take me to a regular task list, but notice the interface is very, very different. Instead of it being a regular list item, I can go in and say test task. I can go through and do a due date. Let's load. Oops, that was too fast. Who that's assigned to. I can go into the people picker. And do test user 1. You'll see that the user interface is slightly different on here also. I can change to details view. It's a little bit faster in the performance. I can click test user. And I can kind of add those values. And notice the Ajax piece goes in, and that adds that value directly to the test list. And there we go. And it now dynamically adds into a timeline when those tasks. Now what you did see quickly is if I hover on a menu, on an item, you get this little kind of pop-out thing that pops up all over the place. So you'll see this one here. And this one is unique and consistent across the entire platform now. So you sometimes get a menu, or you get something like this. So I can open, remove it from the timeline. I can now do a subtask that's inherited from there, or I can actually click the open menu and get further information that I want to do. Now this is great. This is consistent across the entire platform now. Everywhere you go, you will see this little thing show up. You'll also see little information bars all over the place that you can click on that will actually tell you this is fantastic, showing you the keyboard shortcuts or showing you an explanation of something that you're trying to do. So if I go back into here, test 2, I'm going to change the date. I'm going to make it so, let's do it on the 2nd. Test user 2. And that's going to go ahead and put that value in there. Let's wait for that to load. And it resolves the user dynamically, and then the user interface should update once the Ajax component kicks in. So this is great addition to the project, allowing us to add tasks and subtasks and then have them appear in a timeline web part. Now this web part here, the timeline, is actually available to be used anywhere. And so you can go into a regular site, add the timeline web part, and connect the timeline web part to an existing SharePoint list view, and you will get this timeline view. So think of the application of that. It could be a list of documents. You want to have a timeline. You have the flexibility of doing that. So let's come back at the team site, at the project site, and let's go to a team site. Everybody's seen these before, except this time around we have document views, and we also have these nice tiles again on the actual page. So I've added some existing documents. So let's take my annual report. You'll see that I get some base information. It tells me who it's shared with. I can actually share it directly from here if I wanted to add permission to it. As another user, I can go and follow this document. And when we follow a document, I'll show you what happens into there. Or I can actually go in and do checkout. I can download copies. I could kick off workflows. Or I could simply just click Edit. Edit's going to launch me into Word 2013, the preview installation I have. That's going to load that document directly. We'll leave that going. It should be loading in a second. But you'll notice that the view does look slightly different. And what you'll see is we have this new interface where you can go down and check multiple options. And then instead of it, and you'll now have this files option that will allow you to perform various tasks based on how many of the objects have actually been selected. So if I select one, I can do edits. If I select multiple, then I'm going to have obviously other options. You'll see that the popularity trend, excuse me, that might take some time to load. So while that's loading, you'll see that my document's loaded directly into Word. If you haven't seen Word 2013, it looks very similar. Notice this icon in the corner, exactly the same as we had before. In SharePoint, it now focuses on the content, and you can obviously go back to that. If I just close, that was the wrong. If I just close that and go back to my team site, it's now downloaded me a usage Excel spreadsheet, which I can save, and I can go through and look at that. Obviously, my usage report's not going to have a lot in there, but it's a usage report for those specific files. So at any point, if you want to see how popular something is, you can come in and select on it. I can also share and obviously follow that information also. You'll notice that on the left, I have this news feed link that shows up in the team site. The news feed is now built into the actual sites themselves. So we're now merging collaboration with social elements together. So I can go in and start a conversation. I can invite other people into the team. I can see more posts, and I have the social capabilities. So what do you think of the annual report? Notice I have these two options. I'll talk about these a little bit more in detail in a moment. So I can now post this option here. I'm actually going to flick users again and go to my test user 3 account. And I'm going to go to the news feed. And I'm going to say I could follow the administrator. So my test user 3 account is not following the administrator. So I don't see any updates for that user. So I could follow him at that point. I'm now following. I'm now going to reply and say, it was fantastic. Of course, we all sound like that. It was fantastic. And so now we have this nice intermingling of those two technologies. So if I go back up to the home page now, what about once we've got that content in there, how does search bring that information back? Now search is great for this. So for 2013, search has been enhanced just a little bit. In previous 2010 version and before, we had the enterprise search and standard search capabilities, and then we had fast search. This time around, everything's kind of been mingled together to give us this new search capability. So let me search for the word advertising. If I do a search for advertising, the first thing you'll notice is we have these kind of predefined sections up here. It's found my document, which I had tagged as an annual report with the word advertising next to it. And right in the search, as I hover up and down, we now get this little pop-out window, which I said was consistent, so we have the same thing. So I can now go across, I could open directly from here, I could view the library, or I could send a link to that. Or I could follow if it's an actual physical object inside the SharePoint solution. You'll see we get the refinements, as always, which can be filtered out. But this web part is fantastic. This allows me to kind of do this, today, 1 week, a year. I can go through and change what documents return, when things have been changed, and filter dynamically by just sliding the result set back. So not only do we have click on author, or click on the result type, or some managed metadata that you may be using, we can now use a little slider control. Very nice addition to the SharePoint 2013 environment. We can be alerted on search, as you would before. We have search preferences that we're able to set from here also. We actually can have clear the personal history. You actually get a personal history of search that you're able to kind of maintain and see. I can decide whether I would like suggestions or bring any of the personal query history back. So kind of the same idea as going to Bing or Google and it remembering some of the things that you typed. SharePoint now has the same capabilities. We can also click on Advanced. I'll click on the Advanced link, wait for that to load. You'll get the same idea that you've been used to before, where you can go through, pick your properties, do query matches, and then do and or parameters all together. But what is really useful is when it comes to here. So if I do a search for presentations, it's going to bring back, now notice what it brings back when I select everything. We're not only getting team sites, we're getting documents, but we're also getting comments and questions that have been added to different locations. Now we can narrow these down by saying just show me conversations. So there's a conversation that test 3 user had that was referenced to this. Now notice what it does. When we pop on the right hand side, we get the answer which contained the word we search for, and then we get the original post that that person responded to. The same for each of these as we go down. And we can obviously click directly to view the conversation from here. If I click the People tab now, the People tab will go through. I don't have any users associated with the word presentations. If that was the case, that would bring users back. And if we go back to everything, or we choose videos or reports, this will bring back predefined content that matches that area. So, back to the main site. So we have search enhancements, team site, document enhancements, navigate, we have group enhancements, communities, blogs. We also have some web part enhancements that are quite useful. So one of the things and the issues that we faced in previous versions of SharePoint was the idea of aggregating content successfully. So doing it between multiple cross-site collections, and the only way of achieving that in the previous version was to actually either write something custom, download a third party, or to use the search mechanism. Now for this version, the search mechanism is fantastic for this. So we have a web part called the content search web part. This allows us to drop it on a page and configure the web part to actually build predefined queries and use standard XSLT styling and CSS to represent content from other site collections. So if I just edit the page, I just want the page to show you the kind of the web part capabilities that are available. So you'll see that we have the web part here. I'm going to edit the web part. Obviously, not all of your end users would be able to do this. Wait for that to load. And what you'll see is it looks very similar to a content query web part. Now, we still do have that, and there's a few enhancements to that. But the content search is where it's all at. This allows us to define the number of items. We have some predefined styles, so the list, a list with paging, and the slideshow. I'm using the list view, and I'm using a specific item style called 2 lines. I could change that to pictures, or I could change it to be a list with paging or slideshow. Slideshow will give you this kind of click on the links, stay on this page, I'm in edit mode, click on the links, and it will slide through. You'll see it dynamically changing through the individual items. I'm going to put it back to list, it just makes more sense this way. So the actual query is generated from the query builder. So wait for that to load. Now, once again, we get the nice little dialog. So the query builder allows me to select a result source. Now, this version of search allows you to create result sources. So items matching a content type or a tag or a current user, these can be defined inside the search mechanism. So I chose to use the documents one because I wanted to present documents. What I can do is I can tie it to a specific site collection, the current site, give it a URL, or don't restrict it. I chose at this point to not restrict it by the URL, which effectively makes it a cross-site collection web part. And then I have the ability to restrict by tag. So if I choose to restrict by tag, what I can actually do is, you'll notice the user interface needs to be changed a little bit, but you'll see here that I can actually type a manage metadata value and choose that value. Now notice the result set went away. I want to make sure it's working, so I'm going to click test. This will refresh. This is fantastic. It shows me the actual syntax that's being used. So if you do need to do some custom development, you could actually use this to kind of formulate your queries and see the result set that comes back. If you choose to show more, then it comes into its own realm. We have the ability to use query templates, grouping query rules, different kinds of templates that we want to use. There's lots of power in this mechanism. If I go back to the basics, and obviously we can define the sort results for that. Notice we have a few more ways of sorting now. Lifetime unique visits, recent unique users, like all those click-through reports, we can actually define the result set that comes back. Now, if we want to refine it even further, we have the flexibility now of looking at the metadata that's associated and bringing this information across and saying, well, actually, I would also like to filter that as a company presentation, or I would like to filter it as a file type of PPTX. And notice it gives you real values. So when you're building the query, you don't have to kind of guess with what the syntax would be. From the settings option, you can determine if we want to use query rules, we want to do URL rewriting, display the page and the web part together, and what the priority would be. So this allows us to really, really build something quite powerful. If I switch to advanced mode, you'll see that we now get a whole host of property filtering that we can now apply and get the results back. And once again, this gives us our syntax for the query, which if you're building custom components, you can actually just take that and start to use that. Fantastic web part. So if I just cancel that now. Now we don't just stop there. I was talking to a colleague today, and this was one of the greatest enhancements that I like. Something very simple, a checkbox that says don't show anything when there are no results. Because we've all seen it. The search brings back results and says there's nothing there. And then you have to try and figure out how to get rid of that. So the nice checkbox allows us to say don't show anything if nothing comes back. We also have this new capability, kind of like the content query web part used to be, but I can change the property mappings, and this time I don't have to guess what the field might be. I can actually go in and say, because of the item style that I am now using, I have 3 values that this is requiring. I can now go to the picker and pick the field that I want to use inside here. No longer do we have to guess and type the name for that field. And then, of course, we have some other settings that we can override, which is where the results are coming from, what the results table will be, whether it's going to be results or personal results or refinement or special terms. So there's some great enhancements just in this single page. Now we also have another enhancement to this, along with the same kind of web part. We have this web part idea which shows you recently changed items, and that covers everything. So same idea again. I'm going to edit the page. I'm going to go back into the web part. And when we go into the web part, you'll see that the configuration is very much the same as the content search web part is, except this one's specifically around recently changed items. So we go into the change query, wait for that to load. And of course, we get the same idea, except this one is unique to relevant results that have been changed. We have the same approach. We can build refiners, we can do settings, we can test, we can build extra. So this is a consistent usability thing now across SharePoint 2013 at the moment, where you're able to come in and build very clever redefining searches that you can use anywhere. This is a great addition to the WCM capabilities that you've come to know and love inside SharePoint. So let me go back up to the root of the site. So one of the other enhancements that was made is to do with navigation. So we've all used navigation in SharePoint before. It's out of the box. It just builds the navigation based on the structure of the sites of where you create them. Now you'll notice here that I've done the same thing. We have some team sites. They're in the same structure. But if I go to my team site called navigation, you'll notice that my navigation structure is completely different. And these don't exist. These are not subsites. These are actual values being brought in from the managed metadata. Now in the back of, I need to be logged in as administrator, so let me just quickly drop back. If I go here and do site settings, when we go to navigation this time, navigation now has a few other changes. So you'll notice that this one and this one are the ones that we've been used to seeing. Display the same or display items below. Now we have a third option that will show manage metadata, and they will be presented from a term set that we have defined inside the term store. And the same goes for the left-hand navigation. We can define to use the both. I created a group called navigation. There's a core navigation node, and you'll notice that I added the values to the term store. And if we go down, you'll see we have these default page settings. And one of these is create friendly URLs for the new pages automatically. And we can talk about that a little bit later on. So what we can do though is if I go to the term store management tool, we'll wait for that to load, and go here, when you click on an item now inside the term store, we now have some new extra tabs that never used to be there. The first one is the intended use of that term set. So I've unchecked the available for tagging because I don't want end users to tag with my navigational structure. I want to allow it for term, for site navigation, and also for faceted navigation for contextual refiners. I can modify, the sort. I can say I want to have a custom sort. Click into here, and this will allow me to sort those values. I can go to, let me just get rid of that. I can go to term-driven pages. For example, I could have a single page that based on the term value that was coming, I could have it go to that individual page. Or what I could do is go to an individual term. You'll notice once again, it's available for navigation. I can actually override the title of that to be something different. I can choose to show it. I can choose the hover text. So if I put something here, please use this link to contact us. And I can then choose between these two options. I can choose a simple link or header, which is the standard way that we would do things. You have a custom page, or you built a page with content, you want it to go to there. Or it will build a term-driven page with a friendly URL that we can do stuff into later. Or if we wanted to, we could actually build a folder and associate that to the folder. So let me just save that. If I now go to the term-driven pages, you'll see that my term-driven page is going to be called contact-us. It's made them friendly. I could change the location of that page if I needed to. I can specify images, some great enhancements here in the SEO. I can actually go to the properties for these pages, and you get an error. I knew there had to be one. But when that loads normally, it comes up and you can add meta tags to the page. You just enter them here, and it will then embed those into the page itself. You can also specify it's going to be used as a refiner in here. So we can do this for each of the individual items, and then when we go back to our site, if I just go back to navigation, go back to the site, what you should see is that little the hover link that I put in there is now available on those links, just by adding that value in there. So the navigation is very powerful. We can now go through and build it. Now I don't have the links ironed out, so it gives me a page not found, but you see in the actual link, if I look at the bottom of the status bar, it actually creates a link to contact_us. I just need to tie everything together and have those metadata values available so we can show content that match there. What you'll see is we also get these edit links option that shows up on the page. So I can click edit, and you'll see that it suddenly shows up. And I can go into here, and I can click link. I can then go in and add a link and see if the address works. And I can start to add other values alongside this navigation. And so it's a great capability to be able to build. So for a public-facing website, you can build your navigation structure completely different to the actual structure of the content that you're trying to get to, which has always been one of the challenges when building a public-facing site. The actual navigational structure doesn't always work too well. So this is a great addition to allow us to move and go to a different approach. So let me go back to the core site. So one of the big enhancements now in SharePoint 2013 is really around the social, the ability for user profiles and information. So you'll see I'm logged in as the administrator, and I've gone to the About Me page. I can actually go and click Edit My Profile. But before we do, you can see the activities for me as the administrator. And I can see that I was following the site, I wrote a post, I did this, I did that. So you get this activity of things that you have done. If I click edit my profile, I'm going to wait for this to launch, you'll see that it's kind of the same in the way it works, except this time, instead of it being a massive long form, it's now been chopped up into smaller sections. So basic information, contact information, other details that you want to associate about you. And then, of course, you get this little ellipse where you can do news feed settings. Now, notice this has been enhanced significantly. So I can do email notifications when someone has started to follow you, or someone has mentioned me, or someone's replied. And I can then do activities that I would like to share. So you're now very much getting into almost like the Facebook Yammer type of idea. But what's cool, though, is I can actually set the language and the time zones and the regions and enable my alternate calendars, my time formats. I can define a work week. So you can now really focus on, you've got your site collection level, or you can now say, always use my personal settings. So you could set your work week to Monday through Wednesday, and that would then impact anything else that you did in the site itself. So if I go back to the first link, which is newsfeed, get nice little messages now. SharePoint 2013 is very nice to us, gives us messages, working on it, sorry for the delay, etc. The newsfeed is really the core to the social capabilities. You're able to come here. You'll notice that that question that I actually put out in the team site is now presented here. You'll see that there's lots of other things that I've done, and you'll see who you're following, and what documents, what sites you have access to, and anything that's a tag that's been trending. Now, if I just click everyone, this will transform it, and you'll notice that we now have a whole different array of those individual users. We're able to embed pictures directly in there. I've got links to documents. I was able to like and to follow. So if I follow test user 3, that updates. It tells me that I'm now following. And this will update the next time it refreshes, and it will say I'm now following one individual. We can also see if my name was mentioned, and you'll see that it does. Notice it says @administrator, very much like the Twitter capabilities. I can now actually say, oh, I would like to mention somebody in a specific conversation. Or I can go and look at activities that have taken place for us, or I can go and look at the likes. So I haven't liked anything yet. However, some of the other users, if I go to my test user 3 and go to them and go to their site, they can view their information. If I go to their news feed and go to their likes, oh, maybe it hasn't liked anything either. So let's go to everyone, and let me just like that, and let me just like that. Now that may take a little bit of time to synchronize, but I've now liked that value. Let's see if the likes show up yet. There we go. And my likes now show up. I liked that value. And as they go through and get processed, the more of those will show up. So you'll see that we have this very rich user interface of being able to act. So if I want to start a conversation, I can now go through and say I would like to add a link. And I can add a link here. I can choose what the display is going to be. Do I want it to have just the text? Or I can say, for example, do this. And then I can post that. And then that, if you notice, that took a few seconds. There's a process that runs that updates that. And then that becomes a link that goes directly to that one. I could, if I wanted to, let me just flick to my test 2 user. We'll go back to the same thing, go to the news feed. And if I wanted to, I could start a conversation and say, check this out. And I can then choose picture. And we're able to upload pictures. I'm going to use one that I've used before. It's going to upload the picture. My picture comes in, and I can then post that value directly in there. And then, of course, the like, reply, and all the follow options. I can even lock a conversation so nobody else is able to add to that conversation. I can also copy a link of that conversation, and you'll see that we have a direct link that appears to that exact thread. So if I was to take a copy of that, and if I just went into here and pasted that, as with most Microsoft links, there's 1,000 lines, 1,000 letters in there. We'll wait for that to load. Leave that going. We flick back to another user account and click everyone. You should now see that that post that was put there was added here. And I can then go through like, reply, or follow up to that conversation, and I can like that conversation. Now you can embed all kinds of different things into this. You can actually go through and add a YouTube video. It's all about adding links directly into the site, and you can embed videos or files or whatever it might be. So using that as the example, if I just open up back to the core site, I'm going to go back to my team site. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to take a copy of that link that's there. I'm going to go and say, please read this. And then I'm going to put a link. I'm going to paste that link. And I'm going to post that. And then that turns that into a link. Now, the one addition to add here is if you're doing this on Office 365, you'll actually get an icon for the presentation. And if it's a PowerPoint, you'll be able to actually get a drop-down window that allows you to click through it. If you want that in an on-premise installation, then you're going to need to have Office Web Apps installed. Just a caveat and note for you, Office Web Apps is significantly different to what it was previously. You do not install that on the SharePoint server. It has to be on its own server and then connected to the SharePoint environment. But you'll be able to actually get a live preview of the documents directly inside here. So if I'm looking at me as the test user, I'm going to click on who I'm following. It's going to come back and say I'm following blah, blah, blah. I can actually click on the follow option, and I can then go through and say I would like to follow test user 2, and I can click on the user account, obviously check that's the right one, click follow, and then as soon as it gets added, it then starts to show that I'm following that individual, and the last comment that was added comes through here. And obviously I can click onto a user account and go in. And I can actually directly from somebody else's profile click feel free to mention the person in the post. And so we have this at mention capability, which means that now when I go back as the administrator, I should be able to go back to mentions, wait for that to load, and you'll see, great to meet you at the water cooler yesterday. And I can then show the conversation and go through the process. So all in all, SharePoint 2013 brings some great capabilities to the table, not only in just community stuff, in social, but in core document management capabilities, in WCM capabilities. There's lots and lots. There's obviously more than we can show in the space of an hour, but that is kind of a quick rundown of some of the main things that you should be looking out for. The big thing for me is the social. Social is now important. It's now really part, and it's time for us to embrace that inside the SharePoint 2013 platform. So I'll hand that to you, Steve.
Excellent. Thanks, Liam. There are a bunch of questions. I'm going to try to bundle these together because some of them overlap. So let's start with the basics. In your demo today, what version of SharePoint is this, and do they still have the, this is one of the questions, do they still have the notion of Foundation Standard and Enterprise? And any specific, are they recommending Windows 2012 as the minimum OS, or does it work on previous versions as well? Okay,
so they still have the SharePoint 2013, well, Foundation is still available, and I'm running the base Enterprise version that's actually available. So you're kind of still stuck with the same idea of what we had before. Foundation has some great enhancements over and above what Foundation would have had previously. As far as specifications go for the actual servers, this is actually running on SharePoint on Windows 2008 R2 standard, and this works perfectly fine. There are some known issues currently using Windows 2012. It does install and it does work, but there are some strange things that don't seem to work too well, but that's more of a Windows SharePointy thing. And you don't necessarily have to have SharePoint 2012, SQL 2012 either. I'm actually running, I might as well show you here, I'm actually running SQL 2012 on this one, but I do have another one that's not running SQL 2012. So you should be able to utilize your standard server builds. 2008 R2 is perfect. There are a few updates that you'll need to apply. Obviously, SharePoint 2013 requires .NET 4.5, so be aware that there are some updates that you'll need to apply. The actual installer will take care of most of those for you. There is a gotcha. If you try to install SharePoint 2013 on 2008 R2 with SQL 2012, every installation I've done so far does fail on a couple of items. The first one is to do with SQL 2008, which is some bits that it's missing. But if you run the prereq installer again, it'll get through and eventually work. I think that's just going to be a tech preview issue, and that should be resolved once we go to launch.
Great. One of the other questions, and there's a host of questions relating to integration, particularly Yammer. There's nothing in this version, I believe, but you know, I think Microsoft's expecting that to come down the road. I don't know how much you can talk about that.
So yeah, there's nothing Yammer kind of thing inside this build. As far as when and if we will see Yammer stuff, that's I'll leave that one to Microsoft to announce when those things will come out. Obviously, the Worldwide Partner Conference was recently, and there was lots of talk about the importance of Yammer inside the SharePoint product. So I'm not going to take any guesses of when that's going to be, but I'm sure over the next few months we'll see some kind of announcement from Microsoft to say we're now going to do some Yammer integration. My own personal opinion, this is just me, would see that for this build right now, and maybe the next one or whatever it's going to be, I wouldn't expect or plan to see Yammer stuff yet. But obviously it is on the cards. So I know that's not really an answer of when it would be and if it's going to be, but that's kind of my thoughts.
Excellent. The other question is about integration with maybe other Microsoft products. I don't know if you've noticed anything in your experience with 2013, but any added capabilities with Microsoft Project integration or anything with maybe Dynamics integration or Dynamics CRM that you've seen?
Not in this version yet. There are significant enhancements in 2013 to do with Project, but there's no other integration as such apart from the standard stuff that's normally there. There are some web parts that are available inside the platform for some of the other integration. Hold on 2 seconds, let me just see if I can get a page ready just to show you. Just so you can see some of the web parts that will actually be available. And these are more focused around the kind of the business data. Let me just see if I can find the exact ones. So in the actual web part rollout, we do actually have some business data ones, which you're obviously used to. And there is also, I don't have them enabled in this one, so I can't show you, but there is some other web parts enabled which will allow you to, as previously in 2010, some more SAP integration and things like that. And there's also, there is some level of Dynamics integration, but I don't have the web parts enabled here.
Okay, great. Any significant changes? I know we looked at, and one of the questions actually was about some of the terminology. When you showed discussions, we're really talking about discussion boards, right? Are they one and the same?
Yes. So
what used to be discussion boards are now this idea of discussions with comments and things like that.
Yeah. So if you go to like a regular team site, we still have. If I go to the site contents where you have all the main stuff, we still have this idea of adding regular kind of applications that you can go through. And so your document libraries, and you've still got your discussion board type capability. So if I just do test discussion, oops, that wasn't the button I wanted to press, and click create, you still get the standard kind of capabilities that you would expect with a standard discussion. Notice it does look very similar to the one that we used in the community site. The only different to the community site one is it doesn't have some of the categories, but you do get this reply and edit capabilities. So even a regular discussion board, as we used to, has now been enhanced to do this kind of edit and follow and alert me, mark it as featured, all those kind of things which we didn't have previously. But the ones in the community and the ones in the My Site are a little bit more advanced over that one. But yeah, so the kind of discussions are now really that.
So but you have the option to do the more traditional, which is what we're seeing here, as well as
yes.
Now the discussion. They're actually two different content types.
Yes, that's right. So you have this main discussion, which is the standard one, and then of course on the site. Now the news feed link, which is where the conversations began, that's a little bit different to these normal conversations. So you still have the more traditional way of doing conversations.
Gotcha. Any changes that you've seen to wikis? I know you showed that as an option that you could create. Have you played around with that? Has there been any significant improvements or changes there?
Not lots and lots of changes now. Still the capabilities, just a nicer interface. I hadn't created any in here for this presentation, but yeah, there are some changes. Just kind of more design changes and some of the power of linking content together.
One of the questions very specific about an instance in what you've seen in 2013 for features for internet sites. Compelling enough reason to postpone a project is about to get started on 2010 to wait for 2013 with its internet features. I know we saw some SEO stuff. I know we have the new navigation, but what are your thoughts around some of the internet-facing or capabilities, enhancements around internet-facing sites?
That's kind of the golden question. Should we wait? Should we go with it? Whatever it's going to be. I've really liked 2013. There's some great features. From building a public-facing website, it's going to be fantastic. Not having to build so much custom components to make it work is going to be fantastic. It really depends what the public-facing site is about to do. I mean, obviously, be aware that it's moving from a known 2010 platform to an unknown 2013 platform. But I would say, my own personal view is that the enhancements to this version, obviously outside of what the final version will be, are probably significant enough that I would love to build a public-facing website on 2013 right now. Even down to just the navigation settings, the new web parts that are available, down to how easy it is to custom style a site, really from using good old-fashioned Dreamweaver and being able to just make it apply to everything that's in the site. And search, fantastic enhancements for a public-facing website. So if it was me and I could justify it, I would wait for this.
Right, and it's like you said, it's the $1 million question or the golden question in the fact that there's a number of other factors in play in any project that you would do. In this particular case, they're looking at a bread and butter site. So what are the risks in waiting? What are the risks in going early on 2013, 2010? How easy is it going to be to upgrade if you go 2010 to 2013? So, I think for anybody, it depends on the situation and what they're looking to do. But I think to your point, there's a lot of compelling features that make doing a public-facing site on 2013 pretty attractive.
Yes. Yeah.
This is a good one, and it's specific, but I think maybe you can talk about it in a slightly broader brushstrokes. Is the community site mobile friendly? And my thought is maybe you can talk a little bit about the enhancements in mobile in 2013.
Okay, so a big enhancement. Obviously, the whole important thing right now that everybody, not just SharePoint, but just the web specifically, is all about a responsive design. being able to make the content show on specific applications, different devices, whatever it might be. Everything inside SharePoint 2013 now can be changed to kind of suit mobile content to a certain degree. So we have this new, it's not really new, it's kind of an old thing that came back again, but to do with creating channels. Channels allow us to target specific devices and define how the content should be displayed. So, for example, I'm not going to go through the process doing this. We will do some other stuff on this a little bit later on, but you can identify the channels, and you can identify the user agent, for example, a Windows phone or an iPhone or whatever it might be, and the SharePoint 2013 is technically quite a responsive platform to be able to change how the content gets rendered. Now, if we look at, let me just go back to the community site for a second, and let me just go to site contents and go to my discussion list. Just wait for that to load. Oops, that seems to have frozen for a second. I think it's frozen. Hold on to the joys of working with a preview version.
Right.
Yeah, it just froze on my VM for a second.
Yeah, I'm on your list. We're seeing your list settings screen.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for it to refresh.
Oh, okay.
Apologies for this. Okay, if it comes back, I'll get that to work. But you're able to actually define the mobile look and feel. Everything can be enabled. What I wanted to show you was inside a list. So if I go down to discussion list, okay, it's loading back now. Can everyone see that now? And if I go down to my list settings and scroll down, where's the one that I wanted? It must be my mouse. My mouse keeps stopped working. Okay, I'll wait for it to load. It's paused again. At the bottom of the views and everything else for all of the content, you now get this mobile setting that allows you to define the channels that the content is available to inside the views of the content that you want to get to. As far as mobile rendering of pages go, that's still going to be really down to your responsive design inside the master pages. But obviously one of the great features now is you can build that responsive design directly in Photoshop or whatever it's going to be, export the HTML, the nice sexy responsive design, and then just convert that to a master page. Knowing that you've tested it already, and SharePoint will accept that HTML that you've defined and convert that to a master page for you. I mean, you have to see it to kind of believe it, I suppose. So it would definitely be something on the list to show next time.
Okay, great. Here's another question about discussion boards. It still has the email-enabled capability where people can, email into a discussion board if the inbound and outbound email configuration settings are there. You can email to a discussion list and have the post show up.
Yes.
Any enhancements there?
You do have this capability where you can actually set the email for a specific, you can kind of set incoming email for a site that can then be tied to Exchange, and then you can almost manage your email inside that site. As far as incoming goes, it still uses the same mechanism. As far as the code level goes, it still uses event handlers to get that information in there. There's no significant enhancements in tying an email system to SharePoint as such, apart from the ability to have a site enabled. But yeah, you can still use the regular list functionality and email directly into that.
Okay, great. Is the group calendar, you showed some of the enhancements around a calendar and the idea of booking time, like a team site calendar, group calendar. Is the free busy time connected to Outlook and Exchange data? Or is that just
yes.
based on what?
Yeah, so obviously on my platform here, it's not connected to anything, so it's actually doing free busy time based on, because obviously that was using a group site for allocating resources, so that would be doing free busy time based on that. But it does connect to your Exchange, which is exactly the same as SharePoint 2010 kind of did when you did workspaces. You could actually say free busy time and check that through, so that process still exists.
Oh, excellent. Anything thus far on what an upgrade from 2010 to 2013 might look like, or any tools that they might have, or just any insight into what that type of upgrade is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as it was when we went from 2007 to 2010. Not so bad as it was from 2003 to 2007, but it's there are some significant changes in the way things work. There are some of the service applications that don't exist now that used to exist in 2010 that they've got rid of. As far as the user experience goes and moving sites across, you can still run the sites in the 2010 look and feel, and you get the capabilities of swapping it over at any point you need to. You still have to take the same considerations that you would in the previous upgrade, you know, making sure the web parts work. I mean, I took some code that I had as a test web part that was compiled for 2010, and when I deployed it into 2013, it didn't work. So from a dev side, there's some elements of change that we'll need to look at from the code side. So if you have solution files, you have third-party components, you're going to have to make sure that they work with 2013. And then as far as everything else goes, that's purely just going to be content that comes over. But there's probably going to be, if you're migrating a public site on 2010 to 2013 or an intranet from 2010 to 2013, I would give yourself some time to go through the migration, a little bit more so than you probably would have done in previous builds, just because of the sheer enhancements that are in this platform. The upgrade, though, is actually very straightforward and fairly easy to do. It's just making sure that your existing content and your applications work outside of that.
Okay, good. Let's see, next question. Oh, this is a good one. That was an annoyance in 2010 and in 2007. Can you post video, like YouTube videos, to an actual blog post in 2013?
On an actual blog post, just check for you. I generally haven't tried that. You can. Okay, let me see if this will load.
Yeah, if you tried to embed it before, it would strip out your embed tag.
Yes, yeah. I genuinely haven't tried that process on the blog site, but obviously we can insert video and get the direct links from here, and we can embed the code straight in there. Now there is a new process in 2013 that does actually allow for code to be embedded to the pages. So there's actually a new web part called Script Editor. It basically looks like this, but you can add it to a page. And so now, whereas people would try to add the content editor web part and write code inside of it to make it work, there's an actual web part component now that allows you to insert HTML or script or embed code into a page. And so the blog is using some of the same mechanism to actually post that in there. So I can't confirm or deny, but I will try that later on and I can let people know.
Okay, great. Next question is around security. Any changes or enhancements to how permissions and groups are handled? And then there's a kind of a follow-up question. I need to find it. That it was interesting. When you showed this idea of share, it looked like it was kind of item level security. Is that one of the things that's been changed?
Okay, so the whole authentication piece has kind of been changed a little bit. So previously in 2010, sites were created, you could create them in classic mode or you could create them in claims mode. And I've been kind of banging on for quite some time that everybody should be using claims mode, and it came true. You can no longer do classic, everything is claims mode now. So when you create a web app, it's now in that method. it still supports the standard Active Directory, standard providers, standard identity providers. The adding of permissions is exactly the same as it would be in the previous version. There is capabilities, but it's something that you're still going to have to do yourself. So that screen that I went to when I added the user and you could type email addresses, obviously if I type, you know, my MSN address, it would probably send me an email, but I still wouldn't be able to get back into that directly. And you probably wouldn't want that. There are capabilities for that, and you will see that if you use Office 365. So if you go and do the same functionality in Office 365, you're able to go in and say, I would like to add Liam and Steve, and add a Gmail or Hotmail or whatever's a live ID kind of account and get access directly into the SharePoint. Now, you could achieve the same thing in 2013, but don't expect that to just work out of the box. It's still sitting right behind your own firewall, and so you wouldn't want to just randomly allow people to come in through that way. So, but it does have the wiring to do that one. It has the wiring for lots of other things also. It has wiring for OAuth as well, which is kind of an industry standard for authentication. It has all of those capabilities built in, but you need to kind of work through how you want to use that. That was really built around the use of applications, which is more of a developer topic, being able to build an application that you can buy from the SharePoint store and put that into SharePoint 2013. Authorization is done using the OAuth framework. So yes, I suppose that that was the long answer. The short answer is it's going to work the same that you're used to working with right now.
Gotcha. And what about permissions themselves? Like I said, this one question is, in the past it was considered best practice to limit item level security. With that share feature, aren't you in essence allowing people to create item level security kind of on the fly? Isn't that what that share essentially does?
Yeah. So the documentation for the limits of that obviously hasn't come out yet, of what the best practice limits are. Obviously in SharePoint 2007 it was 2,000 unique access control objects, and in 2010 it was 5,000. Didn't mean you couldn't go past that, it just meant that you may hit issues with that one. But yes, using the whole share approach is really advocating going over and above what we would used to be doing. There are some changes that have been made to SharePoint to cater for that one as well.
And along the lines of security, can you get down to specific fields in a list or specific columns in a list, like column level security, item level security? I think it's been there, but are there any additional enhancements in that area around security?
No, not down to the actual column kind of security. You still have, you still have the same functionality that we had previously. I'm just going to try and see if I can load a site. It's still the same functionality that you had in the previous version. Going down to that level, obviously you can still create the views to get around that problem, but down to individual fields, that's still not going to be one of those options.
Gotcha. Next question. So I think we saw some, or it looks like they got maybe, or backgrounding the idea of doing a note or a like on a page item and replaced it. How is that different? Can you, basically the question is, can you still add a note or like any page or item?
Okay, like the tags and notes that we had previously in 2010. So right. You still have that capability. It's not necessarily on the home page of the site itself. You do have some of the capabilities in the actual about the kind of my site capabilities. You can kind of go there and add bits and pieces. But really, the idea now is to get away from that kind of tags and notes and really get people to use the specific capabilities like the noteboard web part, like the follow, and then being able to add tags to the content in the news feed instead of actually going to an individual site or page and saying, I would like to do something with this page. I would like to add a comment to the page.
Gotcha. A couple more questions, and we'll wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. In the social area, can you restrict who is allowed to follow you? Are there any control limitations on who's allowed to follow anybody in a site?
You do get an email that would say this person tries to follow you. As far as approve goes, I haven't seen any of the approval process come back yet. It's not like a two-way. It's more like the LinkedIn kind of Facebook idea where you just follow someone. Oh, I suppose it's more like Twitter, where you just follow someone and they don't have to follow you back.
Gotcha.
So it's that kind of idea. Just the previous question, if you do want to put the tags and notes kind of and use them, it's a bit of a bad design, but you actually have to put the ribbon bar back in the page.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was just checking that for you. So on the home page, you'll see on the menu, if I just hide the ribbon bar, so you'll see there's no ribbon bar that shows up here, but you need to actually do show ribbon. That will give you the browse page, and then you click browse, and then you get back to that page obviously. You get back to that same thing again. So it's kind of been extracted away from this navigation, but you can still do the same thing. In my mind, this kind of it's in the ribbon bar. You probably wouldn't want to use that because you probably want to hide the ribbon bar from your end users anyway.
Right. That's a good point.
So.
Is Fast Search part of the SharePoint product, and will it stay separate in this version?
Fast Search is now native to SharePoint.
Okay. Has the managed metadata, does it still have the limitation of 7 levels of term sets from what you've seen?
The last time I checked, which it's still 7. I don't think that's changed. I can double check that to make sure, but that was 7 the last time I checked on this build. It's still the same limitations, and that's as of the latest preview software boundaries documentation that was literally released a week ago.
Okay.
So if you are looking to know what the boundaries are, on TechNet there is actually a document that's been issued for preliminary for 2013. Obviously, it may change as people start to use it and go through things, but there is documentation there.
Okay. Last question. Is there a new version of SharePoint Designer yet?
Yes. Yeah, there's a version of SharePoint Designer that's available. Now, the actual, if you think through logically, the only reason that you would need to now go to SharePoint Designer is really around kind of ad hoc changes that you want to make to using the same kind of data form, web parts, and things like that, or maybe for the BCX components. As far as UI goes, the UI guys don't need to use SharePoint Designer. Now, I know everybody's all jumping around shouting and being happy and excited to not use SharePoint Designer for that, and that was a purpose change that was made in 2013. So really, it's going to be an extension of what a business user may do, or when it comes to workflows, they'll still use SharePoint Designer.
Gotcha. And what about the SharePoint App Store? I think that there's a couple of apps out there for preview as well. I think Nintex has got one out there, but
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the App Store?
Mm-hmm. So the SharePoint App Store is obviously gives you the ability as a vendor or whoever to write custom components that you can connect to the SharePoint App Store and download directly into your application. Now, there's 2 different models for this App Store. The first one is the App Store that's Office 365 out in the cloud. You can connect from your SharePoint environment and go and get an app and download that to your environment. That's the first option. The second option is an internally hosted App Store. So you have the flexibility of having your own app store hosted inside your business, and then allowing apps that you can add and allow end users to kind of deploy. I suppose if you're doing a comparison between 2010 and 2013, this is kind of going to be a more glorified version of issuing sandbox solutions to end users and saying, here, Mr. Business User, upload the sandbox solution. So it has to be enabled. Not everybody can just go in and start adding them. You have to allow permission to do that, and it has to be enabled inside the site. If you want to try the Nintex ones, for example, or things like that, then my advice is go and get a 365 account on the preview and do it there. It's all set up that way. It's much more complicated to configure that on an internal deployment. So there'll be some guidance that we'll need to go through. It'll be documented of when you would want to enable that feature inside the business. But it's a great addition. It just means that we can now build custom components. And the idea behind the SharePoint store and the app mechanism is really around not writing code to run inside SharePoint. And that sounds funny, but that means that the SharePoint servers are more scalable, they're more resilient, and they're not prone to some of the issues that we've seen in previous versions. So we now abstract the applications away from SharePoint and have them run under this SharePoint store context instead. But there's lots more we could talk about.
Right. Oh, yeah. And then we didn't get through, I think we covered about 85% of the questions. And if we didn't get to the question today, I do apologize. But we are about out of time. If you have any questions, please go to thesug.org and post the questions. I'm going to go ahead, Liam, and take control back, because I do want to talk about more opportunities to learn about SharePoint 2013. So coming up in the next couple of months, we at SescuTech are going to have a couple of opportunities to get face-to-face with either Liam or other members of our SharePoint team for more in-person demos of 2013. We're going to be doing them on Friday mornings in September and October. They're going to run from 8 to 10:30 with as kind of a breakfast scenario. We're going to hold those in Chicago, New York, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. We'll be sending out information as we get closer and we nail down the exact locations for these. They're open to anybody to attend for free, and you will be getting email. And if you don't have an email and you're interested in getting an invite for one of these roundtables or in-person demos on SharePoint 2013, you can send an email to julia.o@sescutech.com, and she'll make sure you get an invite. So with that, that'll wrap up today's virtual SUG. Liam, thank you for presenting and showing us all the good things to come in SharePoint 2013. And I know we had a couple people ask about the recording. I'm about 50-50 on whether we got a recording of this. I did get an error message through